Good morning. The Committee on House Administration will now come to order. It is great this morning to have all of our chairs here to outline their agenda and to talk about their budget and the priorities for the 110th Congress. It is customary for this committee to bring the chairs before us to speak about this and to outline their budget. I've been very impressed with what I've seen in reading the various letters and the outlines of the chairs. And as you know, in the 109th Congress, there was not a budget. Therefore, the committee's budget will stay pretty much as it was in the 109th Congress, with just a tweak of a perhaps 2% increase. And so we are very, very grateful to the chairs for their tolerance on this. However, the second half of the 110th Congress, we will be reviewing the budget process again, and we've spoken with the Speaker, and she has consented to review that. So we do have the members coming in the order by time. We're sorry that we're running a little late here in getting started. But this morning we have with us Chairman Lantos and Ranking Member Ross Layton, both representing the Foreign Affairs Committee, and they're here this morning to present their agenda and their budget. Good morning to both of you. Before you get started, though, I would like to at least have the ranking member to have an opening statement before we move on. Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Sorry I held you up for 3 minutes. I was in the back room discussing, and I did not realize you were here. In the interest of time, and since we have a number of people waiting, if you don't object, I will submit my statement for the record and just make a few very brief comments. I first of all thank all the chairmen for coming. I've been in this committee now 12 years. This is an annual program that we go through and listen in great detail to what the committee chairs and ranking members have to say and use our best judgment. This year is totally different than any I've experienced because we have very little judgment to exercise because of the lack of money available. And the decision was made by the Speaker to spread it across board, with the exception of some additional for the Armed Forces Committee, which I personally question because I think the work of every committee is equally important. But nevertheless, that decision has been made. So the only hope for salvation will be next year. I hope we do manage to pass a budget this year, and we'll be able to consider your request in more detail next year. The one last comment I would make, something that I worked for very hard when we took over the majority some years ago, was to restore, or to bring, not restore because it hadn't been there, but to bring every committee up to a 2/3, 1/3 ratio, the majority getting 2/3 of the funds, the minority getting 1/3. And it was a painstaking task because some of the, excuse me, when we were in the minority, some of the committees only received 10% of the total budget. And naturally, the members of those committees were not at all anxious to have the new minority get more than they had been willing to give to us. But with Chairman Bill Thomas, who worked very hard on this, we managed to get it through, and so a few years ago we've reached a 1/3, 2/3 for every committee, and I would hope that every committee before us will commit to maintaining that ratio to the best of their ability during the course of the year. And so I'll ask that question of everyone. I also recognize that chairman and ranking members have considerable leeway as to just how they work this agreement out because there are joint expenses and so forth. And they have been very creative in that. We'll continue that. But it's very important that we continue the principle of 2/3, 1/3. And not just for the benefit of the current minority, but for the benefit of the current majority for the time when they may once again be in the minority. Having said that, Madam Chair, I turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. And now we will go to the chairman for his opening statement, and then to the Ranking Member for her opening statement, and then we'll proceed from there. Good morning to you both.
Madam Chair, Mr. Ranking Member, distinguished members of the committee, my colleagues, allow me to begin with a personal observation, which is also incumbent upon me to reveal the truth. The chair of this committee and I have a special relationship. She is not only a dear friend, but a neighbor, and occasionally I have the privilege of cleaning her car, picking up her lost keys, opening the doors for her, and if she has a particularly heavy package, it is I who carries it in. So I ought to be entitled to special treatment, but I'm not asking for any.
I'm very grateful, however.
I think this amounts to undue influence.
I am just delighted to see this great colleague, a woman of great intellectual distinction and commitment, have this chairmanship. If you'll allow me, Madam Chairman, I also would like to reminisce for about 30 seconds. It was 20 years ago in this room that my wife Annette and I had the pleasure of hosting the Dalai Lama's first appearance in the Congress of the United States. The administration wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. The leadership of Congress would not see him. And it was just a handful of colleagues who joined Annette and me in recognizing this great leader. Subsequently, he was received by the leadership of the Congress, the Vice President, the President, and his career culminated when Richard Gere, myself, and the Dalai Lama appeared on Larry King's program. You can't get any higher than that.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this has been a very bipartisan committee under the leadership of our friend Henry Hyde, and it will be an equally bipartisan committee under my chairmanship. I have the great pleasure of serving with most distinguished colleague from Florida, and you will hear from her in a minute. To indicate the degree of bipartisanship that is present in our work, there were 8 shared members of the committee under Chairman Hyde. I have 8 shared members. I retained 6 of Mr. Hyde's staff people because they have done an outstanding job, and they will do an equally outstanding nonpartisan job as shared staff members of the committee. I don't need to tell a group of your sophistication that for better or worse, and unfortunately for worse, Foreign Affairs has an incredible agenda. Whether you watch television or read the newspapers, whether it's 80% or 90% of the issues, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Iran to North Korea to China to India to Russia to Europe, the issues are with our committee. We are realists. We are not asking for the kind of increase that in terms of our workload we would require. We are asking for a modest 4.9% increase for both the current year and the next year. Let me also mention that in terms of efficiency and productivity, Madam Chair, we have very bad distribution of offices. Speaker Hastert indicated to us that they will try to accommodate us. We have 5 of our subcommittees in the Ford building. This makes it very difficult for us to operate efficiently. And I'm just making a modest plea. I presume on behalf of both of us, that as possible, if you could allow us a consolidation of physical space. I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'll be delighted to answer any questions after you hear from my friend.
Ranking member?
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair, Ranking Member, our friends and colleagues. I have a prepared statement that I'd like to make part of the record, but I would also like to echo the remarks made by our distinguished chair. This is a truly bipartisan committee. It's a delight for us on the other side of the aisle to work with Chairman Lantos on difficult, thorny, complex issues. Today, for example, we have a full committee hearing on Iraq. In the afternoon, we have a full committee hearing on North Korea. Every day, we are meeting the challenges that are presented before us, defeating the radical Islamic militant jihadists, dealing with nuclear proliferation throughout the world. But we do work in a bipartisan manner. It does not mean that we agree with all of the issues, but we do it, we disagree in a courteous and a professional manner. So it's an honor for me to work with Tom and his staff on all of these issues. I echo his comments about our request for the funding, and most especially for a consolidation of space, because going from building to building makes our work that much more difficult. But I also will just submit my statement for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member and members.
Thank you so much for both of you and your presentation today, and thank you for the brevity of it, given the time constraints. Mr. Chairman and the Ranking Member, I hear you very clearly that there is a need for this modest increase. However, again, because of budgetary constraints that we're under, we are trying our best to do whatever we can possibly do to give as much as we can for chairpersons this year. And so I would have to say that at this juncture, what we have afforded you is the 2% increase for inflation, at 2.4 for inflation. But we can look at the physical space that you speak about and see whether the consolidation can be done. Of course, I would have to speak with the speaker and see just where we are in terms of that. You said you had how many staffers in the Ford building?
We have 5 subcommittees in the Ford building. We work on a very integrated basis, Madam Chair, and an enormous amount of time is wasted running back and forth. And this would just help us do our work somewhat more rationally.
Well, that I can
Madam
certainly.
Chair, if I could
yes, please.
just add to that, and also I meant to echo Ranking Member Eller's comments about a fair and equitable distribution of majority-minority funding, and I thank the Ranking Member for bringing that up, and I know that Chairman Lantos is very cognizant of that and has been working with us on that point.
Absolutely.
And you two have worked very well with that, to 2/3, 1/3 ratio, and that's very good, and we're thankful to you for that. I will again look into these consolidation in terms of your 5 subcommittees.
We appreciate
and
that.
see what we can do there. Outside of that, I am sorry that this year brings us to this point where we are trying to struggle with the budget in light of the fact that there was no budget last year. So we're having to come in with the baseline budget from last year with the modest increase for inflation. And that's what we are at this juncture. I would now refer to the Ranking Member for comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, space is at a premium for every committee, and most of the committees I'm on have split their staff. If you could see the quarters that both the majority and minority staff of this committee have, you would be grateful for their situation. I realize that's small consolation. But one question I did have, you wanted to consolidate. Would you be willing to consolidate everything in the Ford building? Have all of your subcommittees and staffs in the Ford building?
I'll be happy to take it back to my colleagues, I doubt that the answer will be in the affirmative.
Yeah, but I just wondered because there's a lot of people who would prefer more space in these three buildings, but I just wondered on that. The other is a political statement. I supported the president's surge in Iraq, but I've made it clear in speeches and in my writings that I felt we should have an equal surge in diplomacy. And I'm quite happy to argue that in your case, if we are going to give more money to the Armed Forces Committee, when everyone else is being held the same, that your committee should also get more so that we can increase our diplomatic efforts as well as our military efforts. I just wanted to...
Well, if I may respond to my good friend, although I realize he was half serious and half witty, if I've just come back from Moscow and had very serious discussions with the Soviet foreign policy leadership. Then I was in Western Europe. In many places I was asked, as the new chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, what is my number one objective? And I had very little difficulty answering it, Madam Chair. I said when I came to the Congress, the reputation, the standing, the prestige of the United States was sky high. It is now the lowest that I can recall in my adult lifetime, which is a long lifetime. And I think our committee has a very heavy responsibility beyond any geographic location, be it North Korea or Iraq or Afghanistan, is to work on restoring global respect and appreciation for the United States as the one remaining superpower with enormous global responsibilities. And your comment that you favor a surge in diplomacy is a comment I fully relate to and strongly approve. So I appreciate your observation.
Well, thank you. And I want to assure you that my comment about matching money for you with money for the Armed Forces Committee or Armed Services Committee, whatever the new name is, I was dead serious. This was not meant.
I appreciate it.
So thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Mr. Lantos and Ms. Ross-Layton, we do recognize the issues that you have are vast and very complex, and you do represent us well when you go abroad and even internationally to speak on the issues of foreign affairs. And so we appreciate the work that you do. I would like to ask if there are other members who would like to make comments before we move on to the next chair. Yes.
Just briefly, first, of course, thanks to the chairman, who I'm proud to say is from our great state of California, and the ranking member for the work that they do for our nation. And it's really wonderful that we have members who are experts in this field. I mean, it's, you know, when you think of diplomacy, you think executive branch, but we also think legislative branch because we have an important role to play. My question is really generic, and I'm not sure how it's going to be developed, but we have, and the speakers announced her interest in making sure that all committee hearings are webcast, and which I think is a great step forward because then the public will be able to see the work that we're doing. Do you know whether that has been accomplished in all of your hearing rooms, or do we need to do something more to accomplish that?
I think we are capable of doing it.
If I could continue, during Chairman Hyde's.
Our full committee hearing room is fully equipped. The subcommittee hearing rooms are not yet, and I very much look forward to having all of our committee rooms.
Well, I wonder
if I can continue.
Yeah.
I echo what the chairman said. Under Chairman Hyde's leadership, we were able to modernize room 2172 of Rayburn, and so that is fully operational. And as the chairman points out, our subcommittees then meet in different rooms,
Right.
and they are not able to do that.
I-
But many of our subcommittees.
I think in
hearings are
order, what we
taking
want to
place
do is
in the
make sure
full.
every full committee is capable of webcasting, and then as we move through this, that every subcommittee
And many
room-
subcommittee
yeah.
hearings do take place in the full committee.
That's true, I think, for a lot of, but rather than bother all of the committee chairmans, I wonder if later the staff could just give us a status report on where we are, and then at a subsequent date, I'm sure you'll want to show the leadership on getting us there. And I just think, if the public could see, what this committee is doing, I think it would be a good thing for not only the committee, but for the country. So I thank you very much for your answer and for your service.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I could just point out that our committee is headed by a naturalized American, and the ranking member is a naturalized American. And here we are talking about foreign policies. This is a
Doesn't get
great
any
country
better
or
than
what?
that. Doesn't get any better than that. Thank you all so much. Because of time constraints, and we have chairpersons who are waiting in the wings, we
Thank
thank
you
you
so
both
much.
so much and appreciate your tolerance with us on the budget.
Great.
We would like to see now the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Conyers, and the ranking member, Mr. Smith. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, and if you would like to just summarize your statements and submit your full statement for the record, we would appreciate that because of the time constraints. Good morning to both of you and welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
To the Honorable Juanita Millender McDonald and our ranking member from Michigan, Vern Ehlers, and the rest of the distinguished former Attorney General of California, of course, and Zoe Lofgren, who has been on our Judiciary Committee as well, and our dear friend from Massachusetts. We're all delighted to be here and to merely let you know of the good cooperation that is being enjoyed by the chairman and the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee. I've been working with Lamar Smith in a very fine way, which makes our submission rather easy and simple. First of all, we don't have any major requests compared to some that you are receiving. And I begin by reminding you, Judiciary Committee is among the most active committees. 13% of the total legislative measures introduced have been referred to our committee. It's always been an active committee. And we have an even more ambitious agenda for the 110th Congress. Immigration is the biggie that we're all hoping now to repair and move forward from the 109th Congress. But we also have lobbying reform, civil rights concerns, criminal justice, commercial and administrative law, patent copyright reform, judicial security, antitrust, among others. I might say that I also had a very cordial meeting with the Attorney General Gonzalez yesterday, and in preparing him to come before the committee. And I think we're going to get more oversight than we've ever had before. And finally, consistent with past practice, Ranking Member Lamar Smith and I have agreed to allocate a third of the payroll to the minority, as usual, after first deducting shared administrative employees. We were at 7 in the last Congress. We're down to 6 now, and this allows additional payroll flexibility to the minority. That is the bulk of information that I bring you, but I'm happy to be before so many friends on this committee, including the Honorable Chairman.
I thank you so much, the gracious gentleman from Michigan, and appreciate your very informative opening statement. You do have an active committee, and I tell you, you have the big guns immigration lobbying reform, and copyright. So we look forward to your leadership on those issues, along with our person here who sits on this panel, who will be working very hard on the immigration. Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Welcome.
Push your button.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, may I have unanimous consent to have my formal written statement?
You may, and thank you so much.
Madam Chair, I'd like to point out to Chairman Conyers that it looks like we have some favorable terrain here. Two members of the House Administration Committee are members of the Judiciary Committee. Have a colleague from San Antonio who just left, who is also a member of the committee, and also a colleague from Massachusetts, who is chairman of the House Ethics Task Force that I serve as ranking on, as a member of the House Administration Committee, too. So I hope those friendships will not pay off, that's too crass, but will be recognized during the process.
Well, we know how to pick them, right?
Sure. Madam Chair, I simply want to say that I support Chairman Conyers' request for a very small, relatively small increase in the Judiciary Committee budget. That 4% is small compared to a lot of other committee requests. And furthermore, most of that 4% is going for an increase in salaries, which is much needed. It's my opinion that, frankly, most of the people who work on Capitol Hill are underpaid and overworked, and this allows the Judiciary Committee to raise the salaries of some of our hardworking Judiciary Committee members. So I'm happy to be here to support the chairman and his request for the Judiciary Committee budget, and I'll yield back.
Thank you so much, and it is good to see the two of you working actively on an active committee, and that you are willing to share your employees to the degree that you can. I would like to have the ranking member make statements because we are on a tight schedule, but I would like to remind you that in spite of the budget constraints that we do have, and you come in first from the baseline of last year's budget, we have only a 2.4% increase in your budget at this juncture for inflation, because that is the best we can do given what we got from the appropriators. So that is the best that we can do, and if there's anything that comes down the pike, we will certainly look forward to working with you on it. Mr. Ranking Member?
Very briefly, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for abiding by the 2/3, 1/3 split. I personally worked very hard over the past 12 years with Chairman Thomas to achieve that goal, and we want to make sure we maintain it. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you so much. Anyone for comments? Mr. Longworth?
Having served on the Judiciary Committee before and now, I appreciate the 1/3 split. I recall in the old days it was not that way, and I believe we got a 20% of staff and 11% of the funds. I wonder, do you have a number of what the ratio of personnel is, staff is, in this request?
It's in here.
I was looking for it. I couldn't.
We have a total number of 86, so it's 51, 21, 25, excuse me.
5125. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Lofgren?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that time is short, but I just wanted to say, having been a member of the committee now for 13 years, I mean, this is an incredibly hardworking committee. I think, some weeks it seems like every bill on the floor has gone through our committee, and especially the salary for the lawyers. I mean, we've got kids coming out of law school that are being hired for far in excess for the experienced lawyers that we're trying to hire in the committee. So I think anything we can do today and also hopefully in the future would be paid off by good service and oversight, and I'm hopeful that we might be able to do that down the line. I thank the chairperson for recognizing me.
Thank you so much, and thank the two of you. It has been great seeing both of you so cordial to each other and working so well together in spite of the budget constraints. We appreciate the work that you do, the oversight that you've done, and we thank you so much for your time here with us this morning.
We hope that your confidence in us will continue throughout the 110th Congress.
Indeed it will.
Thank you.
You so much. The next committee is the Financial Services. The chairman, Mr. Frank. The ranking member, Mr. Backus. Thank you and welcome. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for your patience. We know that you were here on time, and we are running a little behind, so thank you so much.
I believe we have submitted the budget request. We sent along, I am told, an electronic copy in a single PDF file. I have no idea what that is, but I'm told that we submitted it. Fortunately,
We have received.
I have very able people who can do that for me. So there it is. And don't try to explain it to me, Vern. It'll be hopeless.
I know that's right.
So here we are with our request. Obviously, I realize you are given a lot more demand than supply, and we certainly understand your difficulties. Our committee, like many others, has a heavy workload. There have been extraordinary developments in the financial services area, hedge funds, private equity, derivatives. Plus, we inherit, as we take over, as you know, Madam Chair, because of your own interest here, a serious deficit with regard to affordable housing, and we will be trying to undo a great deal of that. We are also trying to deal with a long overdue set of problems that remain after the hurricane in the Gulf. So there has been a significant expansion in our workload, and we hope that you will do the best you can in giving us the ability to deal with it.
Mr. Ranking Member, Mr. Bacchus.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I fully support. Is that okay? Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I fully support the budget request that the chairman has made. There, as he has said, there are many critical issues that come before the Financial Services Committee. CFIUS will be on the floor today. We'll have Katrina tomorrow. Our committee is one of the largest in the Congress, and when you actually divide the amount of money per member of the committee, I think ours will be the third from the bottom. So while I think it is a sufficient amount of money, I certainly don't think it is excessive in any regard. I'll close with that.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks to both of you. And you certainly do have critical issues, and I appreciate the work that the Financial Services has done. That committee has worked just vehemently with the Hurricane Katrina in terms of trying to get that moving. In terms of affordable housing, I am very impressed with the agenda that the chairman and the ranking member have set forth, and we just really am very impressed with your agenda. Unfortunately, the budget constraints allow us to curb anything outside of the 2.4% increase that we will be giving at this juncture, because we just do not have the money that is necessary to go any higher than that. Mr. Chairman, you want to make a statement?
I did, Madam Chair, and I was delinquent not saying this before. You know, we obviously all have needs. Let me underscore one of the things, and I heard you talk about this, and I appreciated that with regard to young people coming out of law school. I think the greatest bargain the American people get, and they don't understand it, is the willingness of so many talented men and women to work here for less than they could make elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And I am chagrined at our inability to do more. One of the things I think we should be addressing, frankly, is the disparity between the people who work very hard on our personal office staffs and the committees. We don't pay either adequately. We pay the personal staff even more inadequately. I would hope this is something we could address. I am embarrassed to be an exploiter of such talented, hardworking people. The system forces us to do this. So whatever we can do, and I would make that our highest priority, don't paint my walls and don't replace my rug. Let's give those people a raise because they deserve it.
I do appreciate that, and I could not agree with you more. We do have very, very talented staff that work on these various committees, and the pay is really something that we should be embarrassed by and with. Mr. Chairman, I have noted that, and I will talk with the speaker about that when I talk with her about the various comments. Mr. Ranking Member?
I would just reiterate what the chairman said. When we recruit staffers, we're recruiting against Wall Street, we're recruiting against top banks, we're recruiting against security companies, insurance companies, and financial services is actually the largest growth industry in America today, and we're competing against even foreign companies that are hiring a lot of our staffers the demand in accounting and all these fields is great. So we, most of our staff have offers off the hill, considerably more money. And we are struggling to maintain our expertise.
Thank you. Mr. Ellers, comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on that last point, I think part of the reason for the underpay is that for years, members of Congress have felt, well, have in fact been paid less than they were paid before they got here. And I think that just sort of spreads through the system, and it's very unfortunate. In my opening statement, I emphasized how hard I had worked with Chairman Thomas over the past 12 years to get equity between the committees and establish a 2/3, 1/3 ratio. And so I'm asking each chairman if he plans to continue 2/3 for the majority, 1/3 for the minority, and if that's all been worked out.
Yeah, I would say, Mr. Chairman, first, I do want to say, while I'm not a deeply religious man, I assume you will be rewarded at some point for having worked closely with Chairman Thomas for that period. Secondly, we have, I think, worked in a completely bipartisan way. We've maintained that ratio, and we certainly pledge to continue to do so.
Yeah, Chairman Frank has been exceptionally fair in the process and in the transition. He really helped us to avoid some hardships, and I couldn't be more pleased or happy over his chairmanship, unless I was the chairman. That would be the only way I could be happy.
Thank you, Ken.
Well,
thank the gentleman.
I just want to say I enjoyed working with Chairman Thomas. I learned so much from him, both what to do and what not to do. It was a wonderful learning experience because he is a remarkable person. Last comment, you should not sell yourself short, Chairman Frank. I know that you're a very bright person, and PDF simply means portable, excuse me, portable document format. It's just a way to send a document from one computer to another computer. Very simple. Someday.
Well, I appreciate
Designed
that.
by Adobe in my district.
Beg pardon?
Designed by Adobe in my district.
Well, I'm pleased to know that, and I am confident that for as long as I have to send documents, I will have people to send them, and when I retire, no one should expect to get any documents from me.
Yes. Okay. Just so you don't have to get.
I do want to acknowledge, however, that since 2004, at the insistence of a member of this committee, Mr. Capuano, I do have a cell phone.
Okay, thank you. Well, at any rate, I won't try to explain JPEG to you. I'll yield back.
Mr. Capuano, you want to answer?
Well, since I've been dragged into this, I would also challenge the chairman to see if he has a cell phone with him if it's on.
I do. There it is.
Sure.
Is it on?
And they're just, and they have just summoned him to the floor.
It is, okay.
No, they don't have the number. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your tolerance. The next chairman and ranking member we have is the Homeland Security Committee. The chairman, Mr. Thompson, and the ranking member, Mr. King. Gentlemen, welcome. Welcome, and thank you so much for your tolerance. Mr. Chairman, and as you know, by sitting and knowing the time constraints, we will ask that you summarize your statements and submit your entire statement for the record. Mr. Chairman, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Milton McDonald and Ranking Member Elders. I'd like to thank you and all the members of the committee for allowing me and Representative King to testify on the funding submission for the Committee on Homeland Security. As you know, our committee is the new kid on the block, having only been permanent last Congress to oversee the fledgling Department of Homeland Security. While new, I promise you that we're old beyond our years. That is because our first year as a permanent committee, Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Wilma struck. We found ourselves not only supervising a department struggling to merge 22 agencies, but also watching as it failed in its first significant post-9/11 test. So we have some challenges. I'd like to say that while I was ranking member, Chairman King afforded me the opportunity to work with him in a very collegial manner. We continue to do so with the change here in leadership in Congress. We have managed 2 suspension bills on the floor, one as late as yesterday. We will do a number of other things around the jurisdiction of the committee. After receiving permanent jurisdiction, I'd like to say for the record, the 2/3, 1/3 ratio will remain in effect. We have worked out all the administrative challenges around that. And as far as our position is concerned, everything is correct. The challenge we have is how do we continue to make good policies toward keeping America safe. It's a challenge, to be honest with you. Bad people think 24 hours a day on how they can hurt Americans here in this country as well as abroad. So we've been challenged. To that end, while we're not asking for any additional monies per se, we did receive authorization from the Speaker to increase the staffing allotment based on previously allocated monies, and that's been granted. So from our standpoint, we're here asking for the continued support of the committee with a nominal increase for cost of living, salaries, and what have you. Apart from that, again, we're all very familiar with what we have confronting this committee and this nation, and we look forward to working in a collegial manner with the Chairman King, Ranking Member King. I'll give you a promotion. Yes.
Watch it now.
I'll yield, if I might, to my ranking member for any comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ranking Member?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Chairman Thompson for his statement. I concur in everything that was said, and I particularly appreciate his reaffirmance of the 2/3, 1/3 ratio, and emphasize again the bipartisan manner in which our committee has worked. I know Ms. Lofgren and Mr. Longworth serve on the committee. We did last year pass bipartisan port security legislation, chemical plant legislation, restructuring of FEMA, and work together on many issues. And Chairman Thompson is now beginning a very extensive set of hearings on rail and transit security funding. So again, the allocation of resources, I believe, is money well spent. It's we're attempting to deal with an enemy which is anywhere, everywhere, and as Chairman Thompson said, works 24 hours a day. So I again thank Chairman Thompson for his cooperation and thank this committee for its indulgence. Thank you.
And I thank the two of you because, as the chairman has said, and you have reiterated, Mr. Ranking Member, you do have a challenging committee, and the challenges are vast. And trying to penetrate those persons whom we really don't know, but we know what they will do and how they will do it, is really quite critical. It is good to see the collegiality between the two of you, and that spreads into your committee, and that's very good. We're happy that you're considerate of the budget constraints that we have given this year, and so we appreciate that as well. The staff allotment, I'm happy that the Speaker was able to grant that, and we hope that that will work and help in some way. So we appreciate the two of you and the leadership that you're providing and the work that you're doing. Now I'll turn to the Ranking Member for comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, first of all, I want to thank you for the commitment to the 2/3, 1/3 ratio. This committee worked very, very hard over the past 12 years, particularly the first 6 after the Republicans took over, to achieve that form of equity. It had been very inequitable before, and this committee wants to make sure we maintain that particular equitable standard, and I appreciate your commitment to that. The other comment is I think it's unfortunate that we don't have additional funds available, and you may have heard my comments earlier about the Foreign Affairs Committee also deserves some additional funds. of those few additional funds that we have are being given to the Armed Forces Committee. And I really think that your committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee also are extremely important and deserve recognition for that too. In particular, I think your committee has more necessary oversight responsibilities than almost any committee in the Congress because of the newness of the department. You mentioned some obvious failures they've had. I think there are a number of other failures, and clearly you need the funds to do good oversight, and it's not easy to do oversight, but clearly you need it. Thank you for what you're doing, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. Other members? Mr. Lofgren?
Madam Chairwoman, I just very briefly, I've had the privilege of serving on this committee since its inception, which has been a terrific honor. The chairman has done just a fabulous job, and the ranking member and he are coordinating. As you can see, it's really something Americans can be proud of. But I wanted to mention also just the outstanding staff that has been recruited. I see the staff director, Jessica Herrera, there, but really every member of the staff, both majority and minority, is highly professional, and if we have an opportunity to keep them through salary augmentation at a later date, the country will be well rewarded for that. It's really a credit to both of you that you've been able to attract and keep such really high-quality people, and I thank the gentlelady for you.
Madam Chair?
Well, as a comment, Madam Chairman, I think Ranking Member King and I hear from people outside of Capitol Hill that very comment. They appreciate the outreach our staff's making toward coming up with best technologies and other things. And so it is a struggle to keep good people. Talent anywhere is highly sought after, and unless we can keep salaries and benefits competitive to some degree, we stand the risk of losing good people because of that.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't say this with the people in the room, but the fact is probably most of these people could leave tomorrow and go to the private sector and do far better, because Homeland Security is obviously an area where the private sector is avidly looking for talented people.
Your thoughts have been reiterated by several chair persons and ranking members, and we know the key to success of any of our committees are those staff persons who give so much to get so little, and so perhaps that is something that we will look into as we move on through this 110th Congress. Mr. Longworth?
I'm proud to serve on this committee, and I noted the comments that we had from the folks from International Relations or Foreign Affairs about consolidation of offices. I would just like the record to suggest we didn't even have offices for this committee for some months. We then had offices that were over in the 3rd Library of Congress building. We then moved over to the Ford building. We did not have an anteroom to our hearing room until just 2 months before we lost our majority, but we fixed them up very nice for the chairman, who now enjoys them. And so this committee staff has been working under some stresses and strains that others don't, just because of the nature of the newness of the committee. Secondly, we have done a very good job in the area of aviation safety, port security. We, working with the now chairman, produced a very good bill in terms of trucker safety. We need to do a lot more in cybersecurity. We need to do a lot more with trains and mass transit. And we need to retain and attract staffers who have expertise in these areas, Madam Chair. And so I would echo what has been said about the need to look at this committee maybe a little differently than others next year when we have a little bit more money, because it had to get on its feet. It's on its feet now, but we find that the challenges are even beyond what we've already addressed, and it is very difficult. I know there was talking about financial services being in the area of tremendous expansion. Homeland Security is an area of tremendous expansion, and we are competing very much right now with the outside to get good people. So I understand the constraints we're under, but I hope this committee will seriously look at the Homeland Security Committee next year because of the unique nature of its needs. Thank you.
Your thoughts are well taken, Mr. Longren, and as we look at FY08, we certainly will look into those things that we have heard from the chairpersons and the ranking member, and I've noted all of those. And surely a new committee subjected to moving from one place to the other is not conducive to productivity, and yet they have been so productive in what they've done. We thank you so much for your time and your tolerance, and look forward to working with you as the year progresses.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
We'd like to just, has Ms. Lofgren left? She had mentioned how many committees were fully equipped and wired, and of the 21 committees that we have, 13 have been wired and fully equipped, or 12 and a half, if you will, because the agriculture is on its way. We're now in the process of wiring it. But once we've done the agriculture, we will have 13 of those 21 fully wired for internet broadcast. And so we're very pleased with that, given we're just into the 110th Congress. So we thank the superintendent and all of those who've made that happen. Now we have the next committee chairperson in the name of Transportation and Infrastructure, my chairman and ranking member. Welcome, Chairman Obastar and ranking member Micah. Thank you. And I say that because I sit on this committee and am proud to be a member on this panel. Good morning to both of you, and thank you so much for your tolerance.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members on both sides, Mr. Ehlers, Mr. Lundgren, Mr. Capuano. We appreciate very much this annual opportunity to come present our case and advocate for the budget that our committee justly needs. You have before you our submission of documentation for personnel compensation, our total budget request, our equipment, travel oversight plan, and we have no plans yet for detailees, so that was left blank. We have a full agenda of work to accomplish in this Congress, a good deal of which was left over from the last Congress. By that I mean bills that were bipartisan in nature, that had either been reported from committee or passed the House, had gone to the Senate, had not been acted on, or went to conference, on which conference was not concluded. So we're recapturing those issues and bringing them back, and every full intention to move that legislation. Now, the House has been in session 19 days since this 110th Congress organized. Our committee has had 12 hearings, 3 markups in subcommittee and full committee, has reported 15 bills. 6 have passed the House. 3 more are likely to come next week. I learned this morning from our majority leader that he has agreed to our request to bring up the 3 water-related bills that we have reported from committee, this combined sewer overflow, the sanitary sewer overflow, and the state revolving loan fund legislation, all of which have languished for quite some time, even though they've had bipartisan support in the committee. So we look forward to moving that legislation. We have the major reauthorization of FAA, the Coast Guard, and that'll be about a $14, $16 billion bill. The Coast Guard reauthorization, which runs in the range of $8 billion. We'll deal with Amtrak reauthorization. We will have a number of oversight hearings, all of which are listed in our oversight plan submitted to this committee for your consideration. We have proposed a budget that stands with the practice of the past 12 years, that minorities guaranteed 1/3 of the funding, and while we will not have a separate minority travel budget, we will continue the practice of the last 12 years to meet every request. As we were given that full consideration in the minority, we'll continue that practice in the 110th Congress. We were satisfied with that approach. We were satisfied with the budget that was submitted in the past 12 years. This budget has been developed in full coordination with the minority staff and with conversation with Mr. Micah and myself, and I submit our plan for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and indeed you have an ambitious, my goodness, agenda ahead of you that you've already started on. 12 hearings, 3 markups, 15 bills, 6 of which passed on the House floor, and 3 are to come. That is quite an ambitious agenda, along with the major legislation of FAA and well, I have port security here because that is a very critical issue to me, but Amtrak and Coast Guard. So you do have a very ambitious committee. Your committee is the largest committee. Am I correct on that? Because
largest committee in the House.
That's what I thought. Okay, fine. Mr. Ranking Member, Mr. Micah.
Well, thank you, and congratulations, Chairwoman Melinda McDonald.
Thank you.
On your important responsibilities and chairing House administration. I worked with you in the past, and both your service here and on the Transportation Committee, and Mr. Ehlers and other members here. I have a lengthy statement. Having served, I think, over half of my legislative career on House administration, I'm going to submit this
we thank you very
for
much.
the record. But you do have an important role, and it is important that the money that the committee spend go through this process. And people on the outside don't see this, but it's an important role of House administration to conduct oversight in these hearings and review even the expenditures of the committees in Congress. This is a bipartisan proposal before you. It does have some modest increases, which will help us. And that's a challenge we face right now, is keeping good folks on the committee and in the Congress in service. And we may have to look at that because it's getting harder and harder to retain those folks when they can go out and make double the salary almost instantaneously. But again, I compliment you on your good work. I'll submit this, and I'm pleased to be on this side of the table as the ranking member of Transportation. Thank you.
Thank you both, and I have a great deal of admiration for both of you, and as I sit on this side, I still know that I'm part of that panel that will come to you for those things that I need as well. I thank you so much for the 2/3, 1/3 agreement that you've put together and have been agreeable on, as well as the fact that we know that many committee chairs and ranking members have come to us saying that good staff is hard to find or to keep. We do recognize that, and in this very intolerable climate we find ourselves in terms of budget constraints, we are going to look at that, and I will speak to the speaker on this because so many of you have come before us today, this committee, to talk about the good staffing and how we're losing them because of the salary competitiveness. And so your words have been, and your comments have been well taken. You do know that because of budget constraints, we can only go the 2.4% increase due to not having a budget last year, so we had to come in from the baseline of last year's budget and just increase that modest 2.4% for inflation. And we appreciate your tolerance on that. If we could do more, we would have done more. The FY08 budget might present, and I think will present, as Mr. Longren has asked, that we look into with reference to staff increased salaries. And so we will be looking at all of this as we move into that FY08 budget. Now the ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, I want to recognize the excellence of the committee and the excellence of the leadership. I may be partial to this because I've been on that committee every second I've been in this Congress. But it is a unique committee in two ways. It's almost entirely a bipartisan committee, has a long history of bipartisanship, very few political squabbles. And secondly, it's the only committee I know of, I may be mistaken on this, but that even though it's an authorizing committee, essentially functions as an appropriations committee on a major share of the budget when we're dealing with surface transportation bill, for example, which is an excruciatingly difficult bill to put together. We're basically acting as appropriators in terms of allocating the money, and Mr. Oberstar has been a veteran of doing this many times. In terms of the size of the committee, if we increase it much more, it'll be as large as the Senate. But even if we do that, I think it'll still be a lot more efficient.
Yes.
And so I commend the committee for what they've done. I also appreciate the 2/3, 1/3 commitment. This committee worked extremely hard to establish that over the past dozen years, and we certainly want to see that continued. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and I agree with you. You and I both serve on that committee still, I suppose, and so I agree with you that it's really one of the most talented teams we have around here, and I guess they helped me to get my teeth into all of this when I came in as a freshman member and went right to the Transportation Committee, and they were so helpful in providing me with some of those things I could go back to the district and brag about. Are there any other comments for any committee members? Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I want to acknowledge the leadership role that Mr. Oberstar has played in that particular committee and commend you. Think of all the committees in my 8 years in Congress, the most responsive has been Committee on Transportation, and especially on the railroad crisis and safety in San Antonio. Again, I surely want to make sure that you have adequate funding so that you hold that hearing that is scheduled in San Antonio in the month of March.
We will do that.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you so much. Mr. Longren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that while the ranking member of this committee has talked about how hard this committee worked to make sure there was a 1/3, 2/3 ratio, that prevailed with this committee, its predecessor committee, back in the 103rd Congress, before there was the changeover. And so I recall serving on Judiciary Committee where, frankly, we got 11% of the budget, and that was extremely difficult. And we looked longingly at the Transportation, well, I think it was called the Public Works Committee at the time, for the fairness of the treatment there. And it's an important thing, whether you're Democrat or Republican, to understand that you ought to allow the minority to have sufficient funds and sufficient staff so that they can make a real contribution to the work of the subcommittees and the committees. And this committee didn't have to wait for a turnover and the big change that was pushed by this committee before they did it. And I'm pleased to see that you're continuing to do that. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Capuano, did you want to make a comment?
Just roads and bridges and harbors.
Well, we thank you both so much for coming before us. It is good to see you and continue the good work that you do. When you see my seat empty, it's because I'm here trying to do the House business, but I shall be there whenever that time permits. Thanks again so much for your tolerance and the budget constraints, and hopefully we can do better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Well, committee members, it seems that we have come to kind of a lull here before the next group of chairpersons come. So we are going to recess for a while. With unanimous consent, we will recess the committee until around 11:15, when the other set of members will be coming through. It's about 11:15 when they come through. So with the unanimous consent that we recess the committee until then. We will see you at 11:15. Thank you.